This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hello, my name is Brad and I review tech for creative professionals, and today I'm talking about masks. Not that kind of mask, but the kind of mask you might find in an art program like Procreate. You know what? This'll all make sense in a minute. A mask is used as a way to control where paint shows up in your illustration. Masks are incredibly helpful tools, and we're going to be using them today to make this illustration in Procreate. And if you want to follow along step by step exactly the way I'm doing it, you can download the sketch I'm using here today. Just bust open a new browser tab and type in brad.site/sketches. You'll get the sketch I'm using here. You can just save it on your iPad, import it to Procreate, and you're good to go. Masks in Procreate are a lot cooler than masks in real life, and not just because they don't restrict your breathing. It's because they restrict your painting. I'll explain. If I'm painting with watercolor and I want to cover up some of the paint that I've laid down, one way to do it would be to cut out a piece of paper and lay it over top. Masks in Procreate work roughly the same way. Let's start with our background and then we'll mask it out. First, I'm going to paint my trees. Since they're just long lines, I'm going to make some boxes using the shape tool in Procreate. If you want to make a nice shape, you can just start by drawing the best rectangle that you can, and at the end of it, hold your pencil or your finger on the canvas and it will snap into a rectangle shape. Make sure that you're closing your shapes though. If there's any gap in your space, when you use the color drop tool, the paint will leak out and fill everything. I'm gonna go ahead and just draw all my rectangular trees first, and then once those are set up, I'm gonna drag my paint swatch from the upper corner into each one of those just to fill them up. And then I can fill in the rest of the background with a slightly darker shade of the same color. This is important. I don't want too much color contrast between the foreground and the background trees here. I want them to fade into the background and just barely be noticeable. I'm also going to add some branches for visual interest here and some little notches and lines in the trees to make them look more tree-y. Tree-like? Tree-ish. Once I get all those pieces parts in place and it's looking good, I'm ready to move on to the next step, which is creating my mask. And you're going to see a bunch of options pop up. Now, like that piece of paper we put over our watercolor painting earlier, we're going to do something similar here. So let's go ahead and tap that and create our mask. Looking at our mask layer in the preview, what we see is basically just a white box attached to our layer below it. Masks work like this. Where there's white paint, we can see through it. Since everything's white right now, we can see everything. As soon as I start laying down some black paint, that covers areas up. Everywhere where there's a black line, things disappear. What happens if you use gray paint? It's somewhat transparent. It's somewhere between black and white. The darker I make that gray, the more of that paint will not show through. What's cool about masks is they're not destructive. I haven't had to pull out an eraser and actually destroy or remove any of my artwork that I then can't get back. It can mask it out, but keep that stuff underneath in case I want to resize it or add to it later. If I mess up my mask, I could just delete the mask itself and start over. I don't have to redraw that whole background. I'm going to draw an organic shape around the background, and I'm going to make sure that shape is closed, the same way I made sure that the tree shapes were closed earlier. And then I can grab some black paint from the upper right-hand corner and let it fill in the outside, and what it does is it creates this nice organic shape that's going to be living underneath our character. And congratulations, you now know how to use masks. But wait, there is another kind of mask. It is called a clipping mask, and it works a little bit differently. And I love clipping masks. I use them a lot more in my work than I do this normal mask. But before we jump into that, I want to thank today's sponsor, Squarespace. From websites to online stores, marketing tools, and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence to run your business. There are a ton of templates here. You want a store to sell your artwork? There's a template for that. You want a portfolio to show off your work, maybe impress your clients? There's a template for that. In fact, there's a lot of templates for that. You can even try your templates on, like different masks. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/BradColbo to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. All right, I think we're ready to talk about our friend, the clipping mask. If a standard mask is like a piece of paper you lay over your illustration, a clipping mask is like tape that you put over your illustration before your drawing. Your paint will only show up where you don't have that tape. Don't do that to your iPad. This is easier to show than it is to explain. If I draw a shape and I want to color in just that shape, not the outside, I can set the layer above it to be a clipping mask. Now anything I paint on the layer will only show up where there is already paint on the layer clipped below it. Wait, why use masks instead of just alpha locking that layer? Like I said before, masks are non-destructive. So if I put that on a layer above, I can draw whatever I want, paint whatever I want, and if I change my mind, whether it's the color or the texture, it's much easier to change that out if it's not embedded on the same layer. For this illustration, I want to keep my base colors separate from my texture layer, so if I want to recolor later on, that's going to be really easy to do. So let's keep plugging away on this illustration. I'm gonna go in, block in each shape with a solid color. I'm also gonna put each block of color on its own layer. So the head is on one layer, the hair is on another layer, the shirt's on its own layer. This does create a lot of layers, but it makes it more flexible to work with as we go. So this is what my illustration looks like once I get all of my colors blocked in. Now in this instance, I had all my colors picked out from my test drawing ahead of time, but usually when I'm creating these things on the fly, I don't know what my core colors are gonna be until I see them, which is why I like keeping each one on their own layer. It's so easy for me to go in, recolor the backpack, and find the right shade or the right level of contrast for my illustration. Now for those clipping masks, let's start with the head. I'm gonna make a new layer above this head shape, and then I'm gonna set that to be a clipping mask. You see here, there's a little arrow next to the layer, it's pointing down. That's letting us know that it's clipped to the layer below it. Now I can grab a darker shade or just add some shadows along the top and along the side. I'm using a texture brush here that I got from a paid pack. I'll link that down below if you want it, but you don't have to pay for anything. There's a lot of great texture brushes already in Procreate. Like this one I'm pointing to here, this comes with Procreate, it'll give you a similar effect. I'm just picky. So on that same layer, I'm gonna draw in all the face details, like the eyes and the mouth and the nose and the ear hair. Once I'm done with that, I'm gonna go through every single layer and rinse and repeat. I'm gonna go in, add a new layer, clip it to the layer below it, add my texture, jump to the next layer, create a new one, clip it to the layer below it. You get the idea. So there we go. This is pretty close to what our final artwork is gonna look like. I think that it's looking pretty good. If you wanna learn more about Procreate, maybe how I pick contrasting colors or do mock-ups, I'm gonna throw a couple videos on the screen here that are definitely worth checking out. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, let me know down below in the comment section. Like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff, and I'll talk to you guys in a couple of days.